I opened my lake garage one Friday morning expecting to grab a tackle box, and instead found two classic cars parked inside like I was running a private storage facility for the HOA. At first, I thought I was looking at some kind of mistake. Then I found the note taped to my workbench. Temporary community overflow. Thanks for cooperating. That's when I realized my HOA Karen neighbor had made a very expensive assumption, because I wasn't even in the HOA. When I bought my place on Blackwater Lake, I did it for one very specific reason: distance. Not distance from town, although that helped. Distance from committees, neighborhood politics, and the kind of suburban power addicts who think owning a clipboard counts as a personality. The property sat just beyond the official boundary of a waterfront subdivision called Pine Harbor Shores. If you drove through the main entrance with the fake stone pillars and the little decorative fountain, the HOA-covered houses lined the water in neat little rows. Mine sat farther down the shoreline on an older parcel that had existed long before the development showed up. Different deed, different access road, different utilities. Most importantly, no HOA. That was not an accident. I had checked 3 times before closing because I'd already spent enough of my life dealing with people who thought community standards meant whatever annoys me personally. My place wasn't flashy, but it had exactly what I wanted: a modest lake house, a detached oversized garage near the shoreline, and a gravel service drive with enough room for a trailer, a workshop, and my fishing gear. The garage was one of the main selling points. It had a high ceiling, old but solid roll-up doors, and enough space to store my boat, tools, and a couple of project pieces I liked tinkering with on weekends. It was my space. Quiet, useful, private. Or at least it was supposed to be. The first sign Pine Harbor Shores was going to be annoying came about a week after I moved in, when a woman in white capris and expensive sunglasses showed up at the end of my driveway in a golf cart like she was inspecting enemy territory. She introduced herself as Cynthia, one of the community coordinators for Pine Harbor. Community coordinator, of course. She had that practiced HOA smile that somehow manages to be both fake-friendly and threatening at the same time. She welcomed me to the greater harbor community, which was the first clue she planned to include me in things I had specifically paid not to be included in. Then she started asking questions. Not neighbor questions, inventory questions. How often I'd be using the lake garage, whether I planned to activate the shoreline bay, whether I'd be participating in overflow access accommodations during seasonal event periods. I had no idea what half of that nonsense meant, so I just said, no. She blinked like nobody had ever answered her with a one-syllable word before. Then she pointed toward my garage and said, well, if you're not using all of that space, the harbor does occasionally coordinate support storage. I said, you mean in my garage? She gave a tiny laugh and said, just when needed. I said, then it won't be needed. She didn't love that. She left with the same tight smile and the kind of expression people wear when they're mentally writing your name under a category called future problem. After that, I mostly ignored Pine Harbor. They sent me 2 welcome packets I never asked for, one invitation to a shoreline standards mixer, and a weird little brochure about approved dock furniture colors, which was especially funny considering they had absolutely no authority over my dock, my furniture, or my life. I tossed it all. But I noticed Cynthia didn't entirely stop paying attention. Every now and then, I'd catch her or one of the other golf cart HOA creatures slowing down near the side road that ran behind my garage, looking, taking mental inventory. The kind of behavior that always means somebody is planning to get too comfortable with something that isn't theirs. Summer rolled in, and with it came the annual Pine Harbor Lakeside Heritage Weekend, which was apparently a 3-day festival of boats, wine, old money cosplay, and people pretending they enjoyed acoustic covers of Fleetwood Mac. I only knew that because the traffic doubled, the noise carried across the water, and suddenly every road near the subdivision was clogged with golf carts, trailers, and men named Brent trying to reverse expensive toys with zero skill. I wanted no part of it. I spent most of that week fishing early, grilling late, and staying out of sight. Then Friday morning happened. I headed down to the lake garage just after sunrise to grab a tackle box and some spare line before taking the boat out. The side service door was unlocked. That was the first thing that hit me. Not open, just unlocked. I knew I had locked it the night before because I'm obsessive about doors near the water. My stomach dropped a little, but not in a panic way. More in that cold, focused way where your brain instantly starts listing possibilities. Break-in, maintenance error, some neighborhood idiot. I opened the door and stepped inside, and just stopped. Sitting in the middle of my garage, where my work table and trailer clearance should have been, were two classic cars. One was a cherry red late 60s Mustang convertible with white leather seats. The other was a powder blue vintage Corvette that looked like it had never touched rain in its life. They were spotless, covered partially with soft cloths like they'd been tucked in for the night. My boat gear had been pushed against the wall. My rolling tool chest had been moved. My extension cords had been coiled and set on top of my own workbench like I was the intern in someone else's museum. For a solid 5 seconds, I honestly thought I was having some kind of heat stroke flash forward. Then I saw the note. White paper, blue tape, stuck right to my workbench. It said, "Temporary Community Overflow. Thanks for cooperating." See, that's it. No request, no explanation. Just a note from the Queen of Unasked Favors herself, informing me that my private garage had apparently been annexed into the Pine Harbor Vehicle Logistics Plan. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because there's a very specific kind of disbelief that only laughter can absorb before rage gets involved. Then I started looking closer. No obvious damage to the cars, no broken lock on the main door, but the side latch had clearly been bypassed, not smashed, just opened with a copied key or a lock cylinder trick. Which meant this wasn't some teenager joyride nonsense. This was organized entitlement. Somebody had made a decision, gotten access, and moved two collector cars into my garage because they had decided unused space is just theft with walls. I did not call Cynthia. I did not post in any neighborhood group. I did what I always do when somebody acts stupid with confidence. I documented first. Photos of the cars, photos of the note, photos of the moved equipment, video of the unlocked side latch. Then I checked my cameras. I had one mounted over the rear service drive and another covering the garage entrance because lake properties attract all kinds of nonsense in summer. And there it was. At 11:18 p.m., the night before, Cynthia rolled up in a golf cart followed by two men in polos and one flatbed hauler. She got out, unlocked my side service door with a key, and waved them in like a valet captain directing traffic at a fundraiser. They carefully backed both cars into my garage, adjusted the covers, taped the note to my bench, and left. No hesitation. No doubt. No sign they thought this was even slightly questionable. That's the part that always gets me about HOA people. It's not just the entitlement, it's the administrative confidence. They do insane things like they're checking sprinkler schedules. Now here's where things get fun. Because Cynthia thought she was dealing with a homeowner trapped in HOA gravity. She thought I'd complain, maybe argue, maybe ask nicely, and then eventually accept some nonsense explanation about community overflow accommodations. What she didn't know was that I had absolutely no contractual relationship with Pine Harbor Shores, no obligation to preserve their event logistics, and no patience for people who turn trespass into policy. So I did the most beautiful thing possible. I complied with the situation exactly as it existed. If my garage had become an unapproved vehicle storage site for unauthorized third-party property, then clearly it needed to be secured and managed according to my own risk and liability standards. By noon, I had called a locksmith, a tow company, and my attorney. First came the locks. Every access point on that garage got rekeyed the same day, and the side service latch was replaced with a coated commercial deadbolt that would have made Fort Knox feel underdressed. Then came the signs, private property, unauthorized vehicles, subject to impound at owner's expense, and no HOA access, no storage, no exceptions. Then came the best part, the tow company. See, I didn't touch the cars myself. I'm not an idiot. I had the tow operator come out, review the situation, verify the unauthorized storage with documentation, and remove both vehicles from my locked private structure as abandoned property left without consent. Everything was photographed, logged, done clean. The cars were taken to a secured impound lot that handled specialty vehicles and charged exactly the kind of daily rate that makes rich hobbyists discover humility. I left the note on my workbench. I wanted Cynthia to know I appreciated the paperwork. She showed up at 3:40 p.m. in full emotional collapse mode. I know the time because the camera alert popped up while I was sitting on my porch drinking iced tea and pretending the universe didn't occasionally write comedy just for me. She stomped straight to the garage, saw the new lock, saw the signs, and then froze when she realized the cars were gone. She looked around like maybe they had evaporated. Then she saw me. "Where are the cars?" she demanded. Not hello, not explanation, just immediate ownership panic. I said, "Which cars?" That nearly killed her. "The community vehicles," she snapped. I said, "You mean the 2 classic cars illegally stored in my private garage overnight?" Her face changed instantly. "They were not illegally stored," she said. "That space was designated overflow for Heritage Weekend." I said, "By whom?" She answered with one of my favorite HOA words, traditionally. Traditionally, meaning, we've been getting away with this for years and nobody stopped us. I told her the vehicles had been removed as unauthorized abandoned property and that any questions regarding retrieval costs could be directed to the tow yard and, if she wanted to get creative, my attorney. She stared at me like I'd kicked a peacock. "You can't tow members' collector vehicles," she said. "Watch me," I said. That was when she finally tried her strongest move, authority theater. She puffed up, pointed toward the harbor entrance, and said, "You are part of this shoreline community whether you like it or not." I said, "No, I'm not. And that's your entire problem." Then I handed her a printed copy of my parcel map and deed summary showing, in county-certified black and white, that my lot sat entirely outside Pine Harbor's recorded HOA boundaries. No dues, no easements, no storage agreements, no access rights, nothing. She actually took the paper, read the highlighted section, and went pale. Because for the first time since she'd met me, Cynthia realized this wasn't a negotiation with one of her residents. It was trespass, unauthorized access, unlawful entry, and liability exposure involving property she had no legal connection to whatsoever. That's when the panic became real. She tried to pivot into apology language, but badly. "This seems like a misunderstanding," she said. I said, "No. A misunderstanding is using the wrong cooler at a barbecue. You unlocked my garage and stored 2 six-figure toys in it without permission." She started saying the board had always treated that structure as available during event overflow. I said, "Then the board should stop treating county records like fan fiction." That landed hard. By that evening, the Pine Harbor board president and some deeply stressed-looking attorney were at my door asking if we could discuss a practical resolution. Translation: they had already found out what impound and specialty retrieval were going to cost, and somebody important was screaming. Turns out the red Mustang belonged to the HOA treasurer's brother-in-law, and the Corvette belonged to some retired developer who funded half the Heritage Weekend nonsense. Neither man was thrilled to learn their collector cars had spent the afternoon in impound because Cynthia had decided my garage was an amenity. I listened to their speech. I really did. They talked about community customs, historic event use, informal understandings, and preserving goodwill among shoreline neighbors. Then I asked one question: "Did any of you ask permission?" Silence. That's always the fun part. Because once you strip away the HOA vocabulary, all that's left is a bunch of adults trying to explain why they thought stealing space was okay, as long as they called it coordination. My attorney took it from there. The board reimbursed the locksmith costs, the tow and impound fees, and the security upgrades I installed after their unauthorized access stunt. Cynthia was formally removed from whatever made-up community coordination role she'd been using as a personality prosthetic, and Pine Harbor had to send a written notice to all residents clarifying that my parcel, garage, service drive, and shoreline structures were not HOA property, not overflow storage, and not available for event use under any circumstances, which honestly might be the most humiliating sentence ever forced into a neighborhood email. Since then, life at the lake has been gloriously quiet again. My garage holds exactly what it's supposed to hold: my gear, my tools, and absolutely zero collector cars owned by people named Skip. Every now and then, I'll hear Pine Harbor gearing up for another community event across the water, and I'll smile knowing they now have to figure out their own logistics like grown adults instead of treating private property like a shared closet. And the best part? Cynthia still won't make eye contact when her golf cart passes my road, which is fair. It's hard to maintain that kind of HOA swagger after you accidentally have two classic cars impounded by a man you didn't even have jurisdiction over. That's the real lesson here. People like Cynthia get so addicted to pretending they own everything around them that eventually they forget the most basic rule of property. If your authority only exists inside your own little map, stepping outside it doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you trespassing with confidence. So tell me, if an HOA Karen secretly stored classic cars in your private garage like it was community overflow, what would you have done? Drop your opinion in the comments and subscribe for more HOA revenge, entitled neighbor drama, and malicious compliance stories.